Episode 14, Envy Porn, Purge the Urge.
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
Good morning, good evening, good night, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, L's and G's and P's and T's and Q's and I's and dots and dashes, and whomever I may have forgotten to say hi to explicitly. Now, after this first Q4L session from yesterday, it was kind of difficult to find a topic to carry on with. And I came up with this title because I was amazed by one single quote, which the infamous and late George Carlin said in one of his shows, which was, "We buy shit we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like." And more often than not, I found that to be true in the business world, in the hamster wheel, as I so lovingly call it. And it was just amazing at how much time the people spent on dressing up for the occasion, which was just a meeting, or dressing up to get on a flight somewhere, say, so that they could look particularly important with their BlackBerry back in the day, or today the newest shiny golden model of the iPhone, the pink gold, of course, for the ladies, who are obviously similarly affected by this envy porn kind of phenomenon going on. And I think the entire thing found its pinnacle with Instagram, with all of these rich kids on Instagram stories popping up and just showing off wealth, which wherever it came from, I'm not going to judge that, but I'm always asking myself the question whether or not this is well invested money. For me, it was not. I never really, well, it was in my late teens, early 20s, I fell victim to that phenomenon, in that I always had to have very expensive clothes, and it had to be seen by the brand that was printed on front of it. And for no particular reason, as Forrest Gump would probably say, just one day it just clicked, and I just said, fuck it. You know, I my dresser was full of expensive suits that I could barely afford, and you know, you get a stain on one of them, it's a pretty bad idea. So anyhow, the price of my wardrobe really decreased significantly at that time, and I just slipped into stuff that I felt comfortable wearing, and not what was particularly pleasing to the eye of people that I was dealing with. And this whole thing started out, I think, when I went into vocational training, when from my first 3 salaries, I believe, I bought myself a watch, a Tag Heuer watch that was insanely expensive. Like I said, I think I spent my first 3 salaries on this watch, which I still own today. Funny side story, some asshole wanted to rip me off in the subway in London a few years ago, and he wanted the watch, and I beat him to shit just because it was such a prized possession for me, probably more idealistic. I could buy probably a box full of them today. But at that moment, it was just such an idealistic object that I said, no, you're not getting it. And we got into a physical altercation, and I don't know what happened to him, but he must have been hospitalized for quite a while. But that goes to show that, you know, you can attach value to stuff that has value to you, rather than showing off the value to to other people. So that being said, where's this show going? For me, this transition period, I wouldn't necessarily call it like a moment's decision, but it was a transition where I kind of started to realize that, having clothes on your body is pretty significant, at least in northern Germany, where it gets really fucking cold and uncomfortable. But yeah, that time kind of faded where I would go to special shops and just buy my Hilfiger sweater or my Van Graaf shirt, which was insanely expensive, or buying a Boss suit or an Armani suit. I had 2 or 3 of those. It was just an insane time, and I spent so much money on things which were in a very brief amount of time out of fashion, and there was nothing to it. It was mass production, and it was like you were paying essentially only the brand and the marketing that went into it. The quality was, I wouldn't say inferior to other products, but it was the same, and getting more value for that. Long story short, it may sound cheap to a lot of you people out there who thrive on this kind of lifestyle, but let me ask you the question: what do you get judged by at the end of the day? Do you really need that world of superficiality to kind of show off and really start to deteriorate your personality in favor of wearing brands that are, in essence, you're wearing a sweater with a little emblem stitched on it, and that's it, and by that you kind of sell yourself and out. Anyhow, it's a long story short. I asked the question, where am I going with this? For me, again, this was a very important part of my life, because I went out of this conventional business surrounding where you had to dress up for the occasion. It was kind of expected. I never really gave a fuck even then. I had this thing where, I grew up in the last breaths of the punk era. And so I had my Doc Martens boots, which I wore to pretty much every occasion. I think, I only took them off to go to sleep. I had 2 pairs or 3 pairs. They last 10, I think one pair lasted 16 years. And I would even go as far. We were invited to a reception when I was still in the finance world, and I wore a tuxedo, just because it was the dress code. But it didn't say anything about the shoes, so I actually ended up wearing these Doc Martens boots to the tuxedo, to this reception, which caught a lot of people's eyes, and attention. But at the end of the day, what kind of transpired during this transitional period was that people really value me because of my personality and because of certain traits that, among them reliability, punctuality, being able to deliver, not talking bullshit, but actually delivering on stuff. And those traits, some of them I learned during my fire department life, which I went into in an earlier episode. And those were really the things which transpired to be important to people. And these traits, which I just mentioned, couldn't be found. And I hung around a lot with insanely wealthy people, and those were not really traits that they were famous for. It was more like you talk to them, they get hammered that night at a party, they wake up the next day and don't know who they are themselves, and not, of course, not what they had talked about yesterday when they were, when you were getting hammered with them. And so, it was like a very, very, very interesting time. And what I learned there was also that there is this newly rich class, which I just mentioned. And one of the more interesting observations I made was that the really wealthiest people that I got to know during my coaching excursions, they looked like bums, and to a degree where they could, they would. It's difficult to explain. Their external appearance was, sometimes I would say even filthy. They had their jeans on, which they were just in the garden with, and a t-shirt that was totally worn, a beard that hadn't been shaved for probably 5 or 6 days, and they just, I don't know, made click in their head, and they wanted to go and buy a new car. That was one prime example that kind of comes to my attention now. And anyhow, this person goes off because he saw an advertisement on YouTube for a new Audi that had just been released, and he just drives off to the shop, and in the attire that he was wearing, buys this, I think it was like 120,000 euro car, just because he could, but I think there is this kind of point that you reach where you don't necessarily need to show off your wealth to other people. You just don't need to. It's about comfort and getting into your comfort zone, which then you can because you've earned enough money. And then comes this period where you say, whatever I'm wearing, I'm going to be the same person. My traits are going to be the same, or the, things like reliability, etc., are going to be the same. And it doesn't really matter what I wear so long as I deliver on the values which are dear to me. And those are quite important acknowledgments to make, or not acknowledgments, but discoveries for me to make. And in that period of time, I was still, not that I wanted to, but it kind of came with a package. You had your first class flights, you had your $600 a night hotel rooms and wherever you were. And, you walked out of these hotel rooms, you looked like a complete fuck up. But at the end of the day, you were still yourself, and you just kind of thrived on this luxury. But what I discovered was that this luxury was making me feel naked because, again, you're staying in a hotel room. So the decorations and the artwork and everything that's in it, it may be stylish, but it's not you to a degree where you would feel comfortable. You're missing all of the stuff that you have at home. You're missing your own kind of pajamas and your own stuff, which you couldn't take on a trip because your luggage allowance was kind of fucked up over and over already. And so for me, when I went out of this entire ordeal and met my better half, it was just so important to make a cozy home with personal belongings, and they're not necessarily valuable. I'm just looking around myself now. I've got a gecko which I brought from Australia. I have several vases, wooden vases that I brought from the Maldives, colorful vases. I've got an artwork, a wooden doll of Karl Lagerfeld, which was a present that I got from my better half. And, we've got all of this meaningful, but not monetarily valuable stuff around us, which brings back memories of certain situations that you were in life. And turns out, these things are so much more comforting than a piece of art that you buy, which, yeah, it has a meaning. And if you really, really, really squinch tight both eyes, you can kind of imagine a compromise where, yeah, that could be you, but not really. And that's the feeling I had in a lot of the hotel rooms. Take the good design, the very tasteful design, the quality materials, and subtract your entire personal stuff, the stuff that you kind of bring from your adventures, bring home from your adventures, and which remind you of the same in a very positive way, and which bring back the smells and the sights and the sounds and the warmth that you experience there. And that's just really some of the interesting stuff that makes yourself that kind of doesn't cost a lot of money, because it's gifts that you buy somewhere, and more likely than not you've been ripped off buying them. But it's the memories that kind of make everything come back and really let you revisit this adventure that you were on from that time. And from what I see in a lot of the kind of posh homes that these Instagram influencers and stars display, there's nothing personal there. It's sterile. It's I don't know, it doesn't speak to me. And I once saw really an interesting person, which was on another contract that I was on, in a kind of management coaching function, and he was kind of explaining to me the same emptiness that he was experiencing in his house. In actually the house that he lived in, he owned plenty more, but this was the one that he mainly occupied. And looking around there, you kind of had the same issue. Yeah, they were designer couches, which probably cost more than one of my cars. And the furniture that he had was probably handmade, but it wasn't really picked, and there was too much of a compromise. So there was like a void in this place that he lived in, and you could really feel it. It just felt cold. It didn't feel cozy. And we ended up really on a hunch, and I think on an extended weekend, going on a road trip really in the country that we were in, and picking up loads of shit and kind of importing the feeling that we had into these items, which are at the end of the day lifeless, but due to the connection between the experience that we had together and this item, they kind of fused together and gave both of us the feeling of having been there, revisiting the smells, the sounds, the temperature. I can still hear the grasshoppers chirping. It was just an insanely interesting experience that kind of turned out to be something that I would have never expected. And I did use this on a lot of the personal trainings that I did later on, and it just works. It's very interesting. And this guy that I just mentioned, he just recently wrote me an email and sent me a picture of a big, huge rock that he had picked up in Hawaii, and it was like a volcanic rock. But he just found it so interesting that he put it on a wooden pedestal into one of his rooms on display. And for him, he said, the feeling of insignificance towards this million-year-old piece of rock that had come from the center of the earth quite recently. It was like, wow, it was a wow effect for him, and he kind of transported a lot of meaning into it. And I found that very interesting to see that this concept kind of worked out. So long story short, should you overcome the urge and compulsion to want to impress? I guess that's one of the core questions which can be deduced from the title. And in all clarity, hell no. If you need that for your life, do it. There's nobody holding you back. I'm not judging anyone for being in this lifestyle, in this, well, for a lack of better term, superficial lifestyle. But try it. Try some of the stuff I just mentioned out. When you go on a business trip somewhere, just pick up an otherwise meaningless item. Maybe from a street artist that hangs around there and makes sketches of you, or whatever. Some other dealer on the street, you're doing good because you're feeding his family, because he's not doing that shitty job for fun and passion. He's doing it because he's got to get food on the table. So you're supporting him, and on the other side, you're going to have a polite conversation more likely than not, with the with the inevitable upsell sales pitch that you're going to get. Fall for it. It feels fun. I did that in Sri Lanka. It was really an interesting experience. I think I even bought a stone there, which was pitched to me, and I bought it. And I can't even tell you where it is, because this guy kind of felt nasty, and so it kind of went into a drawer. And just try it out. Try to look whether the money you spend on a $300 sweater couldn't be better invested in, I don't know, maybe down payment on a house, or another article that is made by sincere craftsmanship and not has the value embroidered on it by Tommy Hilfiger or Hugo Boss or whomever, but that you actually support true craftsmanship by buying yourself handmade leather wallet, which then fits your specifications. Funny story. I'm gonna have to tell this. I'm getting off track again, I know, but I went when I was working in Southeast Asia. I switched countries very frequently, and you would get a shaver somewhere, you would go to the next country, you want to buy new blades. The blades wouldn't fit, you get pissed off, and at the end of the day, you just go to one of those barber shops to get a shave for $1 or $2. And they always used straight razors. So I thought, perhaps we're gonna do that, because that thing's just never gonna fail you. And I went out and searched the intertubes for a product that was of interest to me, and I ended up with this. I don't know what the Damascus steel, I guess, is the term you would use. I don't know. I think it's close to hundreds of layers of steel really folded together. Now, this straight razor looks magnificent. It cost €1,000. It was insanely expensive. But I bought it after making a rough calculation of the amount of money I would spend on plastic blades, industrially made. And, this blade could have only been made by a master craftsman. And I bought it. I still have it. I still use it. And this is a piece of luxury that I have for myself. It's in my bathroom. Nobody really has access to it or sees it. I'm obviously not taking it out, showing it to everyone, but it's a piece of luxury for me that I show off to myself, and have a very good story to tell to myself, and perhaps even to others, on how I obtained it, how I bought it, how it was made, and so on and so forth. Now, I did lose track a little bit. Sorry. Try and really see if perhaps the overcoming of the urge is something maybe you desire. See if perhaps the embroidered logo on your sweater is not worth a few $100, and whether you could support your local shoemaker or your local leather worker to really create you something very unique, and something that meets your specifications 200% rather than 50 if you make a compromise buy from Louis Vuitton or whomever, and see if that works out for you. In that sense, tomorrow is Friday, so it's exercise time. Stay tuned. It's going to be a very interesting episode that I'm going to introduce a very interesting concept to you, hopefully. And if you have feedback, or if you dislike the show, just please make sure to write an email to theverybestpodcastintheworld@gmail.com. And until then, peace out and stay tuned. And I'm looking forward to hearing you tomorrow. Bye.